So start off, thanks for sitting down today. I know this is kind of last minute working this out, and you're still back and forth between Albany. This is supposed to be a
complete session wrap up. There's a few loose ends, so we really finished the bulk of session last Wednesday.
Yeah.
And now we've been called back this morning for a special session tomorrow on Wednesday. So we're looking forward to hopefully tying up the loose ends that were out there.
Yep.
The main one for us upstate is the sales tax and mortgage tax extenders for the counties.
Yeah.
That they rely on those revenues. We extend those every other year. I've been working for years to try to get those permanent, and that they only have to come back to the legislature if they want to increase it further. Haven't been able to get that done. And now, with the open issue of New York City's mayor control of New York City schools, the Assembly has decided to tie our upstate tax extenders to the extension of New York City mayor's control of schools. And I think a couple other issues in there. So hopefully we're going to resolve all these issues tomorrow. The sooner the better, because our counties need to know what their tax revenues are going to be. They're forecasting. It would be a huge hit to their budgets to not have their sales tax extended on these things, and it's extremely important. I've been talking to county officials every day since I left Albany, middle of last week. So they're very concerned over that. I'm very concerned over that. We've passed all them in the Senate individually, as we've done every other year forever. But the Assembly this year has decided to play some games with it. Hopefully we can get that rectified tomorrow.
Now, a lot of talk back and forth on both sides of that they shouldn't be tied together. So I assume you're on the side of not tying mayoral control and the
absolutely.
I
I do not think they should be tied together. New York City has its own personal income tax that expires at the end of the year, so that's kind of akin to our upstate sales tax extenders that go on. The school part of it shouldn't be any aspect of it. Don't get me wrong though, in the Senate in past times we have tied things to mayoral control, but also related to education in New York City. Not apples and oranges, pretty much the same issue. And this year we've tried to do the same thing. But I think that in years past we've tried to do that. It usually results in just a straight extender of mayoral control with nothing else. But we try that. But to mix two different issues completely is wrong. Now the problem with the PIT in New York City and the sales tax extenders is the PIT expires at the end of the year. Our sales tax extensions generally expire in November. However, the counties adopt their budgets in November. So they're going to need to know by late August, September, while they're preparing their budgets, whether this tax revenue is going to be there or not. And if it's not there, it's going to be devastating to our county budgets. And property taxpayers.
Oh yeah. So, assuming that you are back here, not in Albany anymore after Wednesday, session is over for the year. Looking back over the last few months, you had January through June. To you, what were some of the high points for you, and what were some of the low points of the session?
I would say the main overall high point, particularly in my position as chairman of the Environmental Conservation Committee, was twofold. The continued full funding of the Environmental Protection Fund at a record high level, which we've done for 3 years in a row now. But in addition to that, going out with a $2.5 million program, $2.5 billion program statewide to help with water infrastructure projects, both fresh drinking water systems and sewer systems. It's something that municipalities have really fallen behind on. We talk about the aging infrastructure we have, and we've done a lot of work in recent years on our highway, road, and bridge infrastructure, and increasing CHIPS funding, and that has actually increased in the past 4 years by like 45% for most municipalities. Will certainly aid them in helping keep our roads and bridges in better condition. This is a program to expand upon something we started 3 years ago for water infrastructure projects that has been providing a few $100 million each year of grants for municipalities to kind of kickstart water projects, clean water projects. This is much larger at the $2.5 billion scale to help municipalities do that. They've always been able to get low interest or no interest loans to the Environmental Facilities Corporation, otherwise known as the EFC, which is under DEC. This really helps the municipalities that are struggling under a burdensome tax cap right now, with really not much room to grow. And these capital expenses, and even if it's a no interest loan, those payments still need to be made, and they come out of the tax cap consideration and budgeting. These grants will really help get these programs, these new projects started, and make them so that municipalities can afford to do them within the confines of a tax cap, so we don't see municipalities exceeding the tax cap, because it has been extremely successful in limiting the growth of property taxes in the past 5 years that we've had that.
All right, and some other broad parts of the session. Is there anything that you saw that kind of was a lower point for you, or a bill or a resolution that passed that kind of made you cringe a little bit?
Well, nothing I would say that's really made me cringe. You know, there's been a lot of division, frankly, over the so-called free college tuition plan that the governor pushed through in his budget. It's really not a free college tuition plan. The governor can call it whatever he wants. It's really an enhanced and expansion of the TAP program, which I have been very supportive of expanding that over the years. But it's kind of a misnomer to call it free college tuition, because it's not, and it impacts both our SUNY colleges and our private colleges and their operating funds that they get, because it limits funds that they get in return. So, well, I think it was good that we expanded TAP and have some better eligibility for that. I would have liked to have seen something in the area of student loans, and particularly student loan debt interest, because the interest rates are pretty high on that type of debt, and I think we need to do more to make college more affordable for everyone. But you know, another area that I disappointed on, 3 years in a row now, I've passed a paint stewardship legislation through the Environmental Conservation Committee. Got many sponsors on it. It's passed unanimously 3 years in a row in the Senate. The Assembly won't pass it. They've got 70-some sponsors in the Assembly, and that would set up a paint recycling system. It would get that off the backs of our counties that do the hazardous waste recycling days. Paint is a major component of that. It would put the recycling, reuse, and proper disposal of unused paint on the manufacturing industry, on the paint manufacturing industry. This is a project or a program that the industry is behind, the industry is supportive of. They've done it in, I think, about 20 other states right now, and the Assembly for some reason won't move forward on this, which would be a great one. So that's been a big disappointment of mine. Another highlight of the budget would be the workers' compensation reform that was, again, part of the budget, and will hopefully lead to some significant savings in the 10 to 15% range, we're hoping, off of businesses' workers' compensation premiums. It's one of the major costs of business we have that makes us uncompetitive in New York, is our workers' compensation system is very expensive compared to other states. It provides a very good benefit, which I think is important to the injured worker, but we've got to do it in a way that's cost competitive, and we're going to make some changes, hopefully good changes in the system that protects the injured worker, at the same time refines the system, streamlines it, makes cases move quicker to a conclusion, and move forward and hopefully give some relief to business, because the number one issue we have across New York State, and particularly upstate New York, is the economy. The economy in downstate New York is doing pretty well. Upstate New York is lagging. It's lagging what New York City does. It's lagging what the rest of the country has done, and I believe that's largely to do with the business climate and the cost of doing business in New York State, and that's things like workers' compensation. It's things like health insurance costs, which are certainly a major hot button issue right now federally and always in New York State. But energy costs are high, property taxes are high. I've done a lot of work in recent years trying to bolster manufacturing in New York State. And a couple of years ago, we were successful in eliminating the corporate income tax on manufacturers, so that makes it more competitive to do manufacturing business in New York State. And I think manufacturing needs to be a major part of the base of our economy, from which all other aspects of the economy will grow, in my opinion. So We continually have hurdles to get over in New York. There are plenty of good things that got done in this year's budget, but there's always more to do.
On the budget, high points and low points. I know you mentioned workers' comp and the Excelsior program. Any other highs and lows in the budget? It was a rather contentious time and went past the deadline.
Yeah, it went past the deadline, but it was, I believe, 9 days late. Certainly, we strive to get it on time. We have gotten it on time for the prior 5 years, which really hadn't been on time in once in 25 years prior to that. So we have a better track record now. 9 days, I think, to get a better budget is not unreasonably late. I would rather have had it done the day that it was due on March 31st or April 1st. But a week late, in my opinion, isn't all that bad. And things finally came together in the budget. The governor has so much control of what he can put in the budget, and we're limited in the legislature on what types of changes we can make in the budget. So it's always frustrating for us as a legislature to have the governor have so much control over that. And the budget really consumes virtually half of our 6-month session in Albany. By the time we get that, we spend the end of January, month of February, doing budget hearings in all the different areas, and then we really have the month of March to really negotiate the nuts and bolts of what the Assembly wants, what the Senate wants, and try to match it up with what the governor is. So, it's always frustrating. There's always good, there's always bad in there, and that's why they're lumped together in kind of major pieces of legislation that have a lot of parts within them, both good and bad, to you weigh the compromises that are made. And I think we've been successful in recent years to get it done timely.
Yep. Are there any line items in there particularly that you would have liked to see more allocations for, or less?
I would have liked to have seen some continued cuts, even though we have actually cut income taxes and business taxes over the years. I think we still need to do more on the business side to foster job growth, the business climate in New York, to encourage businesses that are here. I think we spend too much money on incentives for businesses. There's a lot of incentives out there, and I think they're important, and I think unfortunately we need them because of the business climate and the uncompetitiveness we have here. But I would like to see, rather than the billions of dollars we're putting towards incentives, a portion of that going to lower the cost of business across the board. We need to do things for the businesses that are the backbone of our economy, locally and across the state, that have been here, that have survived and endured under the sometimes oppressive business climate in New York State, so that they can, because they're the ones that have been here, so they can expand and grow and create the jobs that we need. We've seen some improvement with the economy improving very slowly in upstate New York. It usually lags behind everywhere else over history, anyways, and I'm hopeful that's gonna pick up and ramp up. But it's continued work to help foster job growth.
And you mentioned working with the governor on the budget. I did want to touch on that. From what you've seen this legislative year, do you have any strong feelings of the governor and the job he's done with working with you guys in the last session?
When it comes to the budget, it's generally his way or the highway, which isn't the best of working relationships.
Is that specifically with him, or is that more of just a tension with any governor?
It's been with every governor for sure since I've been there, and I've been through 3 of them now. I was there for the tail end of Pataki. I was there for first 2 years of Spitzer, and then 2 years of Patterson. So really, this is the 4th governor we've had. And the governor carries a lot of weight, because if you don't get the budget done on time, then he threatens you either shut down government, or he'll put an extender in that basically is his budget. It says you either vote to extend it the way I want to do it, or you shut down government. And that's not really a palatable choice for us in the state. We saw what's happened with that federally when that's been done for short periods of time, and it's not positive. Nothing good comes out of it. So we try very hard to work with the governor, but he carries the power in the budgeting process. So we, and between the Senate and the Assembly, we're not always seeing eye to eye on most things either. So it's really a 3-way give and take, where the governor really controls the most of the power in that process.
What about outside the budget process?
We will see on things that the governor vetoes. I was disappointed in several vetoes that he did last year. One of which we were able to get done in the budget this year, and that was the farm to food bank legislation to provide incentives in the form of tax credits to farmers that produce the produce, and the extra they can supply to the food banks and get up to I believe it's up to a $5,000 tax credit in a year to help encourage that, because our food banks are vital to our economies. With the poverty we have, it's amazing the number of meals that they serve throughout the year. They do a great job in conjunction with the food pantries that are out there. So we did end up seeing that happen, but it took a year to get it. Another piece of legislation that we just passed this year, again for the third or fourth time, that I sponsor in the Senate, and it passed the Assembly this time. We did it. Both houses did it 3 or 4 years ago, and the governor vetoed it. And that's legislation in regards to the property tax cap and how it factors in pilot payments for new projects, pretty much through Industrial Development Agency. The governor and Division of Budget and Tax and Finance's position has been that new pilot revenue should be factored within the current tax cap. Whereas if you have a new building built that brings in an extra $100,000 of property taxes, that's full value new growth. That's considered outside the tax cap calculation as new growth. If it's a pilot, if it's that new $100,000 growth from that same building and it's on a pilot for $50,000, half of it as an incentive to get that building to go, that $50,000 is not considered full value growth. It's considered within the tax cap calculation. So it's a deterrent for municipalities and a negative when those pilots come on, that they don't see the full value growth of it in their budgets. We passed it again in both houses this year unanimously. We had to deal with the governor 3 years ago after we both passed it that he would do something administratively through tax and finance. That hasn't been done. So I hope we get the bill to him in soon enough time, and I would certainly encourage an override vote of that. We haven't done any override votes since Governor Cuomo's been in office. We've been pushed around a lot in the legislature, and I think it's time that the legislature acts like we're a separate and equal branch of government and should look at some of these bills that pass unanimously or virtually unanimous through both houses that get vetoed and stand up and override some of these. Show a little more backbone than what we have. We want to work together. It's certainly better for all of us to work together to get things done in an amicable way and through compromise. But I think sometimes we have to show that we are willing to stand up and take them on nose to nose and force an override vote.
Another topic I wanted to touch on, a little bit more policy stuff here. Uber coming to upstate this coming weekend. We're filming this the Tuesday before. You played a part in that. You were a co-sponsor, correct?
Yeah, I was a co-sponsor, very supportive of Uber and making sure in the process that they have to compete on a level playing field with our taxi companies that already exist. I think we've met a relatively decent balance on that as far as insurance requirements and how they have to operate in the communities. We've given communities the ability to opt out of it if they want to. I think anybody would be nuts to do that. So I'm pleased that we finally got it. It took several years to get it. I've used it in other cities. It's been a great experience, and I think it will be a great asset. I'm hopeful that communities like Ithaca, Elmira, and Corning will be large enough and have enough activity to sustain that business model. Because the areas where I've seen it, in New York City, Washington, D.C., other cities, not only has it improved by having Uber, you've seen a massive improvement in the taxi industry and the service they provide as well, when they're not the only game in town. They really stepped up their game, and it's made transportation in those areas much more enjoyable.
All right. Another piece I wanted to touch on, about a month ago, the Lulu scandal. And you were one of the senators named for giving a stipend to a member of the IDC. Moving forward with that, what would you did respond to the Times and to other other
Yeah.
outlets upon that. Looking forward at a lot of corruption investigations in Albany, and both parties have come under fire certainly over the last few years.
Yep.
Looking
Absolutely.
forward at that, how do you respond to critics in that case?
Well, I think this the Lulu's stipend scandal, if it is a scandal,
Mhm.
it's I don't believe anything inappropriate was done there. These stipends have been provided to somebody holding a vice chairman position for several years now. When that chairman holding the chairman position serves in a leadership capacity, that earns a higher stipend. It allows that stipend for that committee that the chairman normally would take, that's not being used, because we're only eligible to take one stipend. You can't get multiple ones. So if you're in a leadership position, like in my case, I'm not in a leadership position. I chair the Environmental Conservation Committee. The chair of the Transportation Committee, Joe Robach, serves in a leadership position that gets a higher stipend than the transportation chair. The transportation chair's stipend is $2,500 more than the Environmental Conservation Chair stipend. So I was put in by the leader, John Flanagan, into the vice chairman position on that, and able to collect that higher stipend. It's been done that way for years. Certainly it's being looked at now. I don't think there's any factual issue out there, because everything's been above board and disclosed what went on, how it went on, that it has been going on. And it's really going to be a legal interpretation. If somebody finds that something was done wrong there, then it's been done wrong by the administration of the Senate, and will certainly take appropriate action in that case. I was honored to receive the vice chairman position and continue serving as NCON chairman as well. So, it's really more to do with the inner house operations of the legislative body, and for the outside, frankly, to be telling one legislative house how to run their operations, I think is clear in the New York State Constitution, that those actions are within the purview of the leadership in the majority of the Senate.
Some might argue it taints the relationship between the Republican Republican Senate majority and the IDC. How would you respond to that?
Well, it certainly doesn't taint that. It might taint it from the view of the regular Democrat minority caucus and the IDC, because they're upset that the IDC even cooperates with the Republican majority anyways. And then for some of those IDC members who have gotten a higher stipend in a similar manner as I just described, there's some animus there, and that's what started out the griping about this to begin with, was looking into IDC members and what stipends they were receiving for the roles they had, and it's really a lot of politics at play with this.
What about corruption in general over the last session? Moving away from
that, and I think the other types of corruption is far different than whatever's even being discussed here with the stipend issues. Nobody's hid anything with the stipend issue. Everything's been out there, fully disclosed on what was going on. There was never a question about anything being hidden.
That's right.
With the other scandals, I was co-sponsor, continue to be a co-sponsor of legislation that would have provided the controller, again, with oversight of the procurement process, which was part of the scandal, the most recent scandal, with members of the governor's office and some contractors being involved in alleged bid rigging and things, and these contracts being awarded through the SUNY Polytech and other entities set up that were not being overseen. That process wasn't being overseen by the controller. There's again a battle between the executive and the legislature now on this. The governor would like to see an inspector general appointed by him to investigate or to oversee that procurement process. We in the legislature say we have a controller. He's a statewide elected official. He's an independent body. That's what his role is, and we should be doing that. I'm very disappointed that we didn't get that legislation to move forward in this legislative session. And I think part of that was from, frankly, leadership in both houses, both the Republican leadership in the Senate and the Democrat leadership in the Assembly, on wanting to keep as amicable a relationship with the governor as possible, so that the work does get done and we don't just get at complete loggerheads and not get things done. So I think that was the end rationale for why we weren't successful. That was Senator John DeFrancisco's bill to do that. I was very outspoken in our conference, as DeFran was, to try to move that forward, and disappointed that didn't move.
All right, and some other things. Hemp, industrial hemp,
Yeah.
that was one of the 11th hour bills that went past.
Yeah,
correct?
yeah. We had, we started the project 3 years ago, or the program, with a limited number of projects under a federal exception that was made to allow for some testing and projects to start and see what hemp products could grow here.
And industrial hemp,
Industrial
not
hemp. Absolutely. You don't need to go back to 1950s reefer madness. Anything with cannabis is bad. The levels of THC, it has to be under a certain threshold level. It does have minute levels of THC, cannabinoid, in it, but it has to be below a threshold that you couldn't sit and smoke a bushel of it in one sitting and get high off of it. And it's got a multitude of uses industrially, both in textiles, in building materials, in paper, even with some of the hemp oils that come out of it, potentially with the medicinal marijuana uses. It would be another application of that. Hemp is not marijuana, so I don't want to disclose that there. And that
making that clear.
And that will be, a lot of potential I see here, both for our agriculture community and hopefully for industrial applications that can spin off of growing it here in New York State. We are set to hopefully be one of the leading states in this now. The first year there was limited of 20 projects. Last year we removed the cap. No, in this budget process we removed the cap on that. So now there's an unlimited number. They just have to be overseen either by a college institution or by the Department of Agriculture in the growing of that, so that the program is studied, and there's some reporting requirements, so we can see what grows, what strains of it grow most effectively. And what we recently did at the end was actually a governor's program bill, which was a very good thing. And I've worked very closely with all these with Assemblywoman Donna Lepardo out of Binghamton over the years. And this program bill sets up really a seed certification process, so that the farmers that are going to get into growing the hemp are going to know they're getting certified seeds, so they don't run into a problem of getting a crop of hemp grows that is slightly over that minimum level of THC or cannabinoid in it, where they'd have to destroy the crop. So they know they're getting seeds that will hopefully fit that requirement. And so it's got, I think, a lot of potential, both in agriculture and in industrial uses going forward, that we hope to be a leader on. We've been falling behind in recent years, behind the state of Kentucky that was really leading on this. I think we've caught up to them now, and I think with this seed recertification program and the governor's big interest in doing this, that we're looking at really the southern tier and the great agriculture community we have to take a big lead on that.
And last topic area, combating the opioid crisis. I know this is a big topic here in Elmira and many places across the district.
I think it was either just the month of March or April. I think we had 25 overdoses within a month with 14 fatalities on that. So that resulted from the mixing of some, I believe it was elephant tranquilizer within the heroin. We see that with the fentanyl being mixed in by the dealers. It's a constant battle, and it's one that all aspects of our community have to be working with, from community organizations, church groups, treatment centers, law enforcement, and us as legislators on how to focus on this. Last year we did a significant increase in budgeting dollars, up to about $185 million in last year's budget. I think we're up to $210 million in this year's budget for prevention programs, treatment programs, to get up to speed with so we have access to treatment. Access to treatment is critical, and we've been woefully limited on that. But we saw through last year's budget, I believe it was additional 25 beds coming to Tompkins County for access to inpatient treatment. We need to see more of that because you have to strike at the moment when the addict realizes they have a problem and want to do something about it. Until you really have that point, you're not going to make much headway at shown through whatever forced kind of treatment or whatever you may go through. So to have that available and not say, oh, you know, maybe we'll find you a bed in a week or two. I've heard too many stories at the Senate task force meetings I've been to where parents have had that coming for their son or daughter 48 hours, 72 hours, and they've relapsed and fatally overdosed during that period. Just tragic stories with that. So treatment is a big aspect that we're working on. Prevention is something we're trying to get the schools more engaged on and working with that because it is just such an addictive drug. And while I always say we aren't able to, I think we've learned our lesson in the war on drugs, certainly in this state, and I think across the country in large part, that we're not able to arrest, prosecute, and jail our way out of this problem. We have to, particularly in the case of heroin, which is so highly addictive, to treat the addict as a public health issue. Treat the addicts as a health problem, as a mental health problem, a physical health problem, and have the access and needs to and the ability for somebody to get into access to treatment and do it. Because if you tell somebody they've got to drive 2 hours to Rochester, 2.5 hours to Buffalo, or hour and a half to Syracuse, the addict's just not going to do it.
Do you notice in working on increasing the budget for things like that, do you notice any resistance in, like you just mentioned, it's a different philosophy, moving that, it's kind of like shifting the train car. Have you noticed difficulty in that?
We've had this Senate task force that I've been on for 4 or 5 years now, and it's been all across the state. I think we've had over 30, maybe close to 40 of these task forces in different areas of the state. So, it's a problem that's affected everywhere, urban, suburban, rural areas. It's affecting all socioeconomic groups, ethnic groups, race groups. So it's something that everybody's seeing and everybody wants to combat, and I think there really is a recognition of the highly addictive nature of this. Maybe that hasn't been seen with prior drugs that were either more just urban-based in their problems, or more rural-based, like we've had with methamphetamines and the scourge of that, and bath salts. They've been largely more rural problems than urban problems. Crack cocaine was really an urban problem. So I think we see a recognition in wanting to treat the addict as an addict. Don't get me wrong, we still want to go after the dealers, those that are in it for profit, and those that are getting individuals addicted, and those particularly that are mixing these dangerous other things in there that are killing people. And that's why I've supported legislation to provide for a homicide charge for prosecutors for a drug dealer that sells heroin that ultimately kills the user because of what they're mixing in it, because they're putting totally fatal concoctions together, and it's a real problem.
All right. To close up here a little bit, over the session, was there one moment dealing with a constituent or a major constituent issue that people have brought into the office that kind of stuck out in your mind?
Well, boy, there's been many. I mean, it's nonstop with the constituent service. That is a major part of the work because certainly when we're not in session in Albany, we're here in the district and going around meeting with people, constituents during legislative sessions, more legislative or budget related. But we're always dealing with issues, helping an individual get health insurance that's been denied to get a certain procedure. We've had success in those. We work a lot, particularly with the growing craft beverage industry we have that around the Finger Lakes, with helping people through the SLA process, the State Liquor Authority. Just helped a business last week in Penn Yan through an appeal process ultimately successful so they can open an outdoor patio on their wine bar that overlooks Cuca Lake. Helping small businesses through those types of things. Certainly the ones that are most rewarding is when we have, somebody that's in a health issue where they're not getting the proper response from their insurance carrier or whatever, and providing some relief in that way, or a small business facing just the bureaucratic red tape and hurdles that don't often make common sense in those, and trying to work out remedies or compromises in helping with that. And that's the bulk of the work, and that's frankly the bulk of the work that my staff does day in and day out, working on these issues, under my direction, obviously, and I get involved in the more complicated, more tricky ones. But it's rewarding to have some success, because a lot of times we're not successful. So when it does happen, it's good.
And lastly, so hoping session is over on Wednesday following mayoral control and the sales tax extensions. What's on the calendar? Any fun things planned for the summer?
Not really. I'll spend some time up to Lake Ontario. My family has a place up there that they've had. They grew up near Mexico, New York, so I get up there as often as I can. But now we've got free time on our hands. I think I'll be looking at scheduling town hall meetings throughout the district, as we do when we have the time to do them. And get around the district, catch up on meeting with local officials, meeting with constituents out in the district to get the real input on what we need. One area I'm going to be looking at this summer, actually, fishing is one of my pastimes, and I get a lot of complaints about the Seneca Lake fishery, relative to even the other Finger Lakes and certainly Lake Ontario, that all have magnificent fisheries, world-class fisheries. In Seneca, everybody's complaining about no fish in Seneca Lake. So I've already had a high-level meeting with DEC officials and the fisheries people on that, and they've moved up a plan to do some netting in Seneca Lake to see exactly what's going on with the supplies of fish, the bait fish, and things. And they're going to be doing some netting in either June or July, I forget, but I'm going to get an opportunity to go out with them and do some of that in the field with them and see what's going on. So it's one of the fun
Cheap
parts
way
of the
of
job.
fishing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Come on.
Throw out the nets and reel them in. So I don't think they'll let me keep any, but it'll be fun to be out there to see that process and find out really what's going on, because it is an area where I do get a lot of input from individuals, probably because it's one of my pastimes. So I talk to people a lot about it, and hopefully we can figure out what's going on and see some improvements in that fishery going forward.
All right. Well, thanks so much for sitting down. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.